to. Oh wait.
Hello.
Are we live?
We're live.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I just got booted for some reason, probably because I was getting angry, and that's what happens when I get angry. But we have a special show tonight. We have a special guest. I'll get to that in a second. I want to introduce our regular panel of characters. One Matt Palumbo with a new hairdo. He still has bangs. We'll talk about that later. Kevin Ryan, who is an advocate for Just for Men, obviously, at his advanced age and that hair color. He clearly uses something in his hair. And then we have Grant Phillips, who suspiciously looks like one of the escaped convicts from upstate New York. So there's something going on there. And then we have our guest, the Director of Marketing at the Bill of Rights Institute, Whitney Neal. You have your master's in public policy and you specialize in education, correct?
I do, yeah.
Okay. So we're going to get into our first topic here, which is Common Core. And I know most conservatives and libertarians despise Common Core, mainly for the reason that it comes as a federal mandate. My first question is a policy question, Whitney, and it's why are the states, certainly I think there's about 30 Republican governors, there could be more now, why are Republican governors accepting a federal mandate from the Department of Education? Are they dangling money in front of their faces so that they can clear up a little bit of the education off of their budget so they can more easily balance their budgets? Go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, I think Common Core goes back to a bribe. We look back at 2008, 2009, and state legislatures were facing massive budget shortfalls for many reasons. And so the federal government was hit with a group of people who had been planning this for about 10 years. We go back to Common Core. The foundations of Common Core started in 1996. So we go 1996, 2008, 2009. These groups come to Congress and they say, hey, you're going to put this stimulus package together. States need money. People need money. Let's offer them money to accept these national standards. So the states were told, hey, if you're going to compete to get money from the federal government, and by competing to get millions and millions of dollars, you're going to agree to take these national standards. And oh, by the way, you have to give kids these tests. You have to give them these textbooks. You have to give them, ABC uniform things. So it was all about the money. And it was all about the bribe.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, this is the same thing again that happened with Obamacare. But my question really is, and you may know a little more about this, is why are I see that they're taking a lot of the money off the state rolls, and a lot of these states have laws where they have to have a balanced budget. So it gives them more flexibility with their voters. But why is it that these Republican governors, very few stand up to these federal mandates? I mean, here in 1980, Ronald Reagan ran on a platform of eliminating the Department of Education entirely. Few people know that it was the Republican Party that really stymied his efforts. What is it about, I don't know, the establishment that they just can't understand? I think they're really going against the will of the people here at some point, and I don't understand how they can continually do this without repercussions. Is it maybe people don't know?
It's twofold. I think people don't know, and it's hard to say, like as you campaign, it's hard to say, yes, I want to take money away from the kids, right? Because the left is going to come out and say, you want to steal from children, and you want to take from teachers, and you don't want to fund education. Even because it's so hard to understand the complexities of public school finance, right?
Right.
And then on the flip side, we look at lobbyists. And on the Republican side, we look at groups like Pearson. These guys, these multinational corporations, donate to Republicans, the Republican governors, Republican lieutenant governors, and Republican state legislators, tenfold to get them to give their contracts to these companies to implement these standards. So testing, textbooks, all that stuff. So it's about the money on both sides. It's public money, it's private money, it's campaigns. It's all about, at the end of the day, dollar signs and not actually about kids and teachers and parents. And that's disgusting.
Let me ask you, is there any need for Department of Education at the federal level? Why do we have, at this point, why do we have state governments? Why are there Department of Educations at the state level? I don't understand where people think there's a need for a Department of Education. Do you believe there is one at the federal level?
None. There is absolutely no need for a Department of Education at the federal level. And if we look at statistics, in the Carter administration, when he said, look, it's time to create an official department for education, he set out goals. And it was, we're going to close achievement gaps. We're going to go hit those kids that are in poverty-stricken communities, and we're going to close the gaps in education between these kids in poverty-stricken communities and these kids in wealthy communities. that was in what, 78? Between 1978 and now, there have been very, 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 if any, insignificant closings of those achievement gaps. And we have spent billions of dollars at the Department of Education. In fact, for fact, 11 cents of every dollar spent by the Department of Education actually makes it to a classroom. So 89 cents of every dollar spent by the Department of Education is actually put back into the Department of Education for overhead and benefits and those programs that are implemented by the department itself. 11 cents of every dollar makes it to kids. That's insane.
And can I add something just really quick, because I was looking at the similar point. 11 cents goes through, but what a lot of people don't understand is that education is funded. 90% of education in America is funded through state and local sources. Only 10% goes through the federal government, and of that 10%, like you said, 90% of that doesn't make it to the classroom. So when people say cut the Department of Education, they're not really talking for it to do anything radical. In fact, it's almost like it would make no difference whatsoever.
In fact, I think it would give the states more freedom, because that 10% of money that comes from the federal government comes with insane handcuffs. So those states who get a small percentage of money, right, for their overall budget are required to then hire specific positions, report specific scores, implement specific programs that go well beyond the amount of funding they receive from the federal government. So if you eliminate the Department of Education, you reduce those crazy stipulations on state governments, you actually give individual teachers, principals, and districts the freedom to create and implement programs that actually impact the kids in their classrooms.
Oh, God, the inhumanity. Localities dictating what the people at the local level should be learning, and oh man. I want to ask you this: where do the unions stand on Common Core, like the NEA and so on, and Teamsters unions and whatnot?
It's been really interesting. So typically, someone like myself would not agree with Randy Weingarten and other people from Teachers Union. But when it comes to Common Core, he actually said that the implementation of Common Core is equal to or worse than the implementation of Obamacare. Mainly because the federal government does not recognize what it's like for a teacher in a classroom. And so the unions overwhelmingly have been against Common Core as well. You see this universal disagreement of everyone who's actually looking at a classroom, except for those bureaucrats that seek to profit off relationships with companies like Pearson or Bill and Melinda Gates or whoever, with whatever agenda they have to implement at that level. Okay,
so this is just basically corporatism at its finest here, is what we're seeing. It really bothers me. Let's get. I mean, a lot of the problems with education too, certainly at the local level and what the federal level uses as leverage on the public as populism, is the failure of public schools themselves. More specifically, the things that we kind of focus on are the economics. Obviously, you know, the school is a service or a product. You can look at it either way, and how it's really misallocated. You have public education in urban areas. People can't choose where to go to school, what best suits their needs. You have this one-size-fits-all approach. We do always talk about minimum wage. What policies hurt the urban community the most? And one of them is public education, that they're not getting the education they need. Do you see like school vouchers as a way of ameliorating a lot of these problems in the inner city with schools?
I do, you know, and I think school choice is a really interesting topic because you've got vouchers, you've got charter schools, you've got a million different options under the sun. But think about this: if you want to buy an apple, you could go to Walmart or Target or Safeway or Giant or wherever to buy an apple. And if that apple isn't what your family likes to eat, or that hamburger isn't what you want to eat, or that brand of French fry isn't what you want to eat, you can go pick somewhere and take your hard-earned money and buy the one that you want to eat. When it comes to your most precious possession, right, your child, you cannot choose who that child spends 8 hours a day with in most communities in America. And a parent should be able to say, look, I'm giving thousands of dollars, whether that is through their rent or through their property insurance or whichever mechanism that state has in place for that. They cannot choose where that child goes. And if that thing is failing their child, so you get expired food from a grocery store, you get a refund, you get to go somewhere else. You get a bad teacher, a bad school, a bad experience, your kid doesn't have an option.
And what incentives do teachers have, though, to provide good service to the students if they can't choose to leave, and they have tenure.
Competition is a beautiful thing, right? If we can implement competition, competition spurs innovation. It spurs excellence. It tells people, like, hey, if I don't do well, I've got to do better than this guy, or I'm going to lose my job, or my school won't exist. If my grocery store or my video store or my retail establishment doesn't perform well and people don't want what I have to offer, they're going to go somewhere else. And sometimes they'll drive 20, 30, 40 miles away to get the thing that they want. We have to do that for kids and teachers and for schools.
Right.
Bleeding and hemorrhaging great teachers because we're putting them in positions to fail and not giving them to succeed. I think sometimes we have a tendency to blame the teacher and we say, gosh, teachers stink, you know, like they're just not doing a good job. You got to look at the system. And sometimes myself, I was an 8th grade teacher. I taught for 5 years. I was really lucky and taught at a good school. But had I been at any other school, I don't know that I would have made it as long as I did. So, you know, we've got to look at the system and say, hey, we've got to give teachers a chance to compete for great positions and great salaries, parents a chance to choose to go where those teachers are.
You can't blame the teacher. They're responding to incentives created necessarily by the state and the bigwigs in their public teacher unions. So no, you can't blame the teachers. It's a system as a whole. But I don't know. I don't know how the teachers unions can control this message and downplay the significance of school vouchers and their success in Cleveland. And I know prior to Cleveland they tried to test school vouchers and it was working out really well. And I know that the teachers unions shut it down, or they despise school vouchers. They generally talk about, oh, we care about the kids, we care about mostly the kids' education, but when it comes to school vouchers, it would actually help a lot of the people most vulnerable in urban areas. It would help the most. They despise it. I can't. Why? Is it because of the incentives it creates that they have to work? The teachers unions have to work harder, or they'll lose membership. What is it?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head with that last comment. You lose membership, right? So if you create an opportunity where good teachers actually have an outlet to show that they're a good teacher and to compete for better wages, then they don't need the union to compete for that for them because their job performance does it on their behalf. Right. And I think until we do that, until we have this mechanism where teachers are saying, hey, look at what my kids can do, look at what I can do, the unions are going to prevail. But once we eliminate that barrier, then the individual teacher and the individual school, gosh, they have so much room to flourish. Great.
Right. Okay, so now I want to move into a topic that I tend to like. Grant, I want to ask you this question. You do a lot of work on minimum wage, public schooling, you know, the harms that minimum wage does to the urban community more specifically. Would you see as privatizing schools completely? It probably would never happen, okay? But just hypothetically speaking, privatizing schools in general, do you think that would mitigate a lot of the problems and increase the level of education here in the United States and do an overall good?
I think it would, but I don't think that. I still think that there would be a significant portion of especially an urban low-income community that would be underserved ultimately.
But they're underserved now.
But Friedman always talked about markets providing, or in one of his books he talked about markets providing products when it's feasible and desirable. And that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone will get a piece of it, and that's usually not a big deal. But when it comes to schools, I think there's a bigger implication there, a bigger picture there, because there are neighborhood effects to a group of people not gaining education. Not that the current system is providing them anything worth mentioning, but there's still people that at the end of the day they're not going to have access to education in a fully private system, right. Which is why as Whitney was talking about vouchers, I'm a huge supporter of vouchers.
So why can't we have a private system and vouchers granted to people that may not be able to afford it? Let's assume that prices, which are the most efficient way to allocate resources, thereby lifting the standard of living for everybody. Moreover, most people won't have the costs. Most schools are funded by property taxes. Most of these families won't have those costs to begin with. So why not have a private school system? If somebody can't afford it, you give them a voucher to a school of their choice.
Because I don't think enough people would buy. Taking it completely out of the public fund, I don't think enough people would save enough money as a result to be able to fund it. You know what I mean? Like I think funding it collectively. I mean, I hate to say that funding it collectively is at the end of the day a more feasible way of actually getting people into the classroom. Now, yeah, in an ideal, and you know what? In a lot of communities, like especially like upper class suburbs, they should be completely private. They don't need education funding. Send that money somewhere else. But in the urban areas, you have to deal with that. And I live in Philadelphia. We have a lot of charter schools, and the teacher unions do not like charter schools. I mean, they went on strike at like a hunger strike, like they were just not going to eat until they got their their health care benefits or something. And a lot of people were saying, okay, all right, well then you're just going to have to starve to death.
Now, also, we're not calculating to like the altruism of a lot of private businesses. It would be good business to take students that can't pay. Like, oh, look, these students may not be able to afford it. We take them on a reduced cost or something in order to, I don't know, to get more customers. I mean, I could see that happening in a private market too. I don't think we give private people enough credit for things like that. You see businesses do this all the time, give away a car, do whatever they can to get attention, marketing, and so on and so forth. Kevin, I wanted to ask you the same question. I'll get to Whitney ultimately because she's smarter than all of you guys, and we'll have a better opinion on this anyway. So go ahead, Kevin. What do you think about the privatization of schools? I don't care about its feasibility right now, but I just care about its practicality insofar as making public schooling more successful than it is now.
Well, first of all, what Grant said is true. I mean, you don't want people left behind. But on the other hand, there's such a big market for it that I think that you would have companies come out and fill the void, and there would be a spot available for everyone. As long as somebody's willing to pay, there'll be a company willing to take your money. And competition, of course, breeds the best and most successful outcomes. The problem I have with vouchers don't we have something similar going on in the university system right now, where essentially people are getting these very big breaks on their cost of education via the government, via various programs, and look at what that's doing, at least partly responsible for the price structure that it's going through the roof right now for the university systems. Now, of course, a lot of those are public universities, but you could imagine the same thing happening, and it does happen in the private university system, where there's so much access to funds, and if those are via a grant or via a voucher, the outcome would still be the same. You could essentially see price inflation to the point where you have, like right now, it's just not affordable for a lot of people.
So you're saying there's so much. I just want to clarify for people. There's such a huge pool of money, certainly at the federal level and some at the state levels, where it's perverting prices, meaning that schools are raising their prices on tuition and so on and so forth to access this large pool of money, correct? Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
And from there, it's misallocating resources. People don't, I'm going to school for free. Well, hell, why not? I probably wouldn't go if I had to pay, I don't know, $2,000 a year, but I'll go for free. And then it puts a strain on resources. It raises prices for everybody else. The pool at the federal level has to get bigger and bigger. And now you put a strain on, teachers and so on and so forth. I don't know if the supply would correspondingly respond. It depends on state laws and so on. But that's essentially what you're saying, right? I mean, through perverting the price structure, it's misallocating resources in the college system as well.
Right. I'd hate to see the best system not put in place simply because people are afraid. But I think the best system is a private, fully competitive marketplace for education. It's never going to happen, ever. Right. Not in the United States, not as long as...
I don't know. I would be pessimistic.
I'm pessimistic because I've seen people who argue against this sort of thing.
No, you're totally right.
And they're never going to change their mind.
You're totally right.
So I don't spend a lot of my time arguing for it, but if you want to know what is going to work best, you privatize everything, you eliminate the government funding, and you're going to end up with the most competitive system, the lowest prices, and the best talent coming in to teach people. It'll never happen, though. So,
I mean, look, I always talk about, but in Adam Smith's time when he wrote The Wealth of Nations, he talked about Britain never having like what he considered a free market system. And then about 70 some odd years later, they repealed the Corn Laws, and you got the Industrial Revolution, and the markets freed up. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily impossible, but I could see your pessimism, obviously. There's so many interest groups involved in this, and the teachers' union being so powerful and being one of them, and it's hard to break them up. Whitney, am I crazy? I'm a conservative libertarian, more so conservative. I mean, I support abolishing most federal departments. I mean, I still consider myself a conservative, and I support privatizing school altogether and giving it a market structure. Am I crazy? Would your contemporaries consider that a crazy idea?
I think my contemporaries would consider that fairly crazy, not because of principle, but because of practicality, right? So, but in principle, I think we'd all agree that that is the right solution to create a competitive marketplace. But we're looking at a situation where we can't do that right now. I mean, I just don't think that that's feasible in the current situation.
Mm-hmm.
But something that you guys touched on that I think is really important, how many kids, when they graduate high school and they go off to college, know how much their K-12 education cost?
None.
Zero. I mean, maybe a kid who was in private school, K-12's parents could tell you how much they spent on private school tuition. But other than that, it's really hard. I think until we put a dollar figure on that value, until we say, hey, you as a person, as a parent, you have the right to spend X amount of dollars on your child every year, what you pay in taxes, or maybe now you don't pay this in taxes because this is what you have to spend, or this is the cost of an education. You don't do that. It's this pie in the sky. Everybody gets it. Frankly, this is where the Democrats want to go with college. You know, everybody gets a free community college education, or everybody gets a free public school collegiate education. We take the value of it away. Until that becomes something of value, until you put a dollar figure on it, when is that kid who is 14, 15, 16 thinking about getting their first job? Maybe they're getting their first job. They can't relate the value of what they're doing for 6 hours a day to what they're doing for 4 for a job.
Right.
We have to create that environment where they see their teacher as someone of value that they're spending time and money with. Those textbooks, the resources in the classroom, everything has value.
Right.
And we just don't do it. And that's a major cultural shift we have to create.
So you're saying, I mean, and we talk with it with vouchers, it's moving towards certain market mechanisms within the system we have now, moving closer to privatization and those market mechanisms. And you're right. And the part of the problem too was with healthcare or health insurance was you had a third payer system. School is essentially like a third payer system as well. People are detached from the prices. I go to the doctor. I don't care how much it costs. The insurance company pays for it, right? So they can just balloon costs all they want. You're not going to see it, and you harm competition in these competitive pricing structures. There's a few parallels there. It's really interesting. We did a lot on. Go ahead.
Can I jump in?
Go ahead.
Kevin was talking about how college and prices inflated when the government started basically giving out grants. Well. So just to give you an idea, from 2008 to 2012, the amount of federal student loans basically quadrupled.
Right.
I don't think that price or that increase in education funding even happened for like the high school level, K through 12 level. You know, I mean, it's definitely grown to obscene amounts, but it hasn't happened in a few years really. Mm-hmm. And I think if a school voucher has a fixed price on it versus universities just saying it's going to cost this much this year, it's going to cost that much that next year, and then the next year after that, I think it makes a big difference, especially when parents can pay. If you have a $5,000 voucher, parents can just pay $2,000 to go to a private school that would otherwise be $7,000. So you just pay the difference of it. So I think there are some ways you can limit the extreme price inflation that we've seen in college, is what I'm trying to say.
Go ahead, Whitney. Sorry.
I'm so sorry. That's a really good point, though, because there's comparative value, right? So if you have an idea of what your K-12 education costs, but then someone comes to you and says, hey, your college education is going to cost this, or this, depending on where you go, you can make a better decision for yourself than you could have if you have no idea of the value of what you've just experienced. We've got to build that into the system.
Didn't President Obama basically say the same thing? He wants, and correct me if I'm wrong, but recently said that he wants to be able to see what the college education is worth and how, and apply that in public records so that people can know where best to go. And in some ways this has happened. I've seen some at least private organizations that have quantified it.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to give Obama a little bit of credit because he's also started to promote career tech schools, and we don't hear a lot of other people doing that. And as much as I hate to agree with him on other things, we've got to stop telling every kid who starts 9th grade that the only way that they're worth something when they graduate is if they've been accepted to a 4-year college.
Right.
Because it's not realistic, it's not sustainable, and our job market can't, it just will not withstand that kind of growth of people with a bachelor's degree.
That's right.
We see some of the problems that we have with student loan debt because every kid thinks, gosh, if I don't go to college when I leave high school, I have failed my parents, I have failed my teachers, I have failed everyone in society. And so to promote things like career and technical schools and give a value to that as well in comparison is really, really important, because we've lost that manufacturing and that tangible product edge in the economy as far as the world goes. How do we rebuild that? We start making people feel like that's a really cool thing to go do.
Right.
Hey, can I respond to that really quick, Whitney? I work at a manufacturing company. We're basically a really high-tech CNC machine shop. We struggle so much to find really good talent that can operate these machines, and all these people do is go to a vocational school for like 2 years, and they're qualified to start out as like a beginner in our shop. They can end up making $25, $30, $35 an hour, and if you come from a low-income family, that is a lot better of an option for you. That's more meaningful work than, say, getting $60,000 in debt and then going into social work and wondering, oh, why do I have all this debt on my hands? And I'm hoping that grows, the vocational school grows, because it is a lot more meaningful work for, instead of hoarding like low middle income people into colleges, and then they're like, oh, I got a bachelor's, why can't I like make more money?
But this is why the price structure is so important. Let's say that college is too much for one of those people. They say, look, I'll go to the vocational school instead. How that allocates resources, obviously multiple resources with scarce uses, is very important, certainly in education and other services as well. And that's kind of what I was getting at with the price structure. Have you ever read, Whitney, have you ever read Brian Kaplan's work on secondary education, on colleges?
Yes.
Yeah, that was some good stuff. I mean, he talks about a lot of the things that I was talking about as, you know, you make college free. I went to a school in urban LA, and there were people that were in college that they literally wrote at probably like an 8th grade, 7th or 8th grade writing level, and really had no business being there. I mean, it was really sad. I'd try to help. Can you read my essay? I'd say there's little I can do here for you. I don't know. I actually asked somebody one time, is English your first language? Seriously. So I mean, you see this when the price structure is perverted, that these people, oh, it's free, I might as well go, and then you have other people that are paying and trying to work hard, and they're using up their other resources, or the teacher's time, or the library, or they take out a book that somebody else may need, that may actually use it to more efficiently. So I see that as a big problem, and I think that if you expose even elementary school and high school to the price structure, you would see the way resources be allocated to where they're most valued and more efficiently as well. Call me crazy.
One of the things Kaplan talked about, though, was the role of the teacher, like you just mentioned in that situation. You've got people who are passionate and they want to go and they want to take community college or college. And then they're put in a classroom where their students can barely read and they can't put a sentence together. What does that do to that person who really sought that out as a career? So you're losing out on both ends. You're losing out on the student and the mentor end. That's really frightening. And I think we have not started to see the long-term impacts of our policy positions in those scenarios. Because we've got people that are going to continue to hemorrhage from those positions. And I'm really worried, frankly, about that gap, that community college to early college gap, and professors and teachers willing to teach in those positions.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with a student going into a vocational school or finding a career out of high school. And high schools need to do a better job, and they would do this in a market, of training kids to have a job when they get out of school. Do you know what I mean? We don't have any programs in social studies, math, English, bio. Okay, great. Teach me a skill. They have no skills coming out of high school.
Is it that essentially what Common Core is? Not so much a technical skill or vocational, but wasn't it set up with an eye towards having people graduate from high school, ready for a job or ready for college?
It was intended that way, right? So in '96, when they started, it was actually corporations who said, look, these are the type of workers that we will need. It ballooned and evolved and was manipulated multiple ways. The problem there is, I think your average guidance counselor, your average principal, your average high school teacher, they know their kids. They want to send their kids to the right places. But at the end of the day, they lose their rating, they lose their job, they lose their funding if a certain percent of their kids go to college. And so their incentive...
I'm sorry, if a certain percentage of their kids don't what?
Enroll in college.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So a lot of these places, they get funding, especially if they are high risk. So here's the really warped part. A high-risk high school campus is at risk if they don't show progress in enrolling students in college and in doing the things that get kids to college. It's so warped.
So it's
you
kind of
gotta-
like the housing structure. I can't. Let's get these high-risk loans to people and see what happens.
Yeah, let's give everybody a house and let's cross our fingers they can handle it. Let's get everybody in college, even if they incur a ton of debt, and cross your fingers that they graduate, because gosh, that's great for everybody.
I mean, this bothers me a lot. It really does. I had a thought today, and this is, I mean, does this come mostly from the left, or is this the establishment GOP too?
Oh, it's equally establishment GOP and the left. I mean, I think that there is no one who walks away from this blameless that believes the government is involved in the solution. And I mean, we know the people. Let's look at our education committees in the House and the Senate, and really break down who those people are, who's showing up for meetings, who's submitting legislation, who's a champion on these issues. And we understand why they're probably Elizabeth Warren is on the Senate Education Committee.
Right.
Al Franken is on the Senate Education Committee. You know,
Stuart Smalley is on the Education Committee.
I mean, come on now. You know.
How many classes has Stuart Smalley taught in his life? That's what I want to know.
Let's go back to the Department of Education. Let's look at everybody who was involved in funding Common Core. 0 combined hours of experience in an actual classroom.
I just find this incredibly fascinating. They anoint themselves, these intellectuals, never did a thing in their lives, a majority of them. They're opining on how teachers should teach from D.C. to an area in upstate New York that have no clue about the kids there. I find that incredible. It bothers me. I wanted to move along, but I want to ask you one more question, and about the establishment GOP. We had George W. Bush, I don't remember the year, but here's a guy, not only did he expand Medicare, which giving a pool of money, a much larger pool of money to doctors so they could raise their prices even more, No Child Left Behind. I mean, what kind of crap is this? I don't understand it. It's a Republican. What are you doing?
Well, it's a Republican president-led piece of legislation. It came out of a presidential cycle where everybody was like, gosh, we're failing, right? Here's the thing that really gets me, and I'm going to lay this out there. We create these situations where we say our schools are failing. We're not passing these international tests. We can't keep up with Singapore. We can't keep up with Finland and Denmark and wherever we want to say we can't keep up with. No one at all sits down and says, gosh, let's look at where these scores come from. Let's decide, man, should we have knee-jerk reactions and implement sweeping policy like No Child Left Behind? Or should we go to the states and say, hey, you guys should take a look at it? Apples to apples comparisons. You look at those PISA tests, you look at those international tests, we test every kid, from the kid with Asperger's to the kid with Down syndrome to the GT kid who takes 500 AP tests. We test all of them, we report those scores. You go to China, the top 10% of their kids graduate at the equivalent of an American high school senior. So you're saying you're going to give me a test ranking, and you're going to say we fail because 100% of our kids can't match the test scores of the top 10% of those kids who make it to the senior level of high school in your country. Let's really talk about an apples-to-apples comparison of what we're expecting here, first of all. And then second, dig deeper. No Child Left Behind created this ridiculous system where states could not begin to compete with federal mandates. So state tests and state accountability and local measures for education went out the window because the federal government said, hey guys, we know better than you. We've got to compete with Denmark that has 3 million kids, even though we have 75 million. We got to compete with them, so sorry. All the good stuff.
Where do they get the idea, and this happens a lot, that we want to be like Denmark or that we want to be like China? I don't understand that. The whole purpose of this country and how it got great was things decided at the state and local levels. What are they doing? How is a Republican president doing that?
Well, I mean, God bless people with good intentions, right? Like, I think a lot of people come into this and they say, I want to help kids, I've got good intentions, we've got to help everybody. But they've never been in a classroom, and the solutions that they implement are from people who've never been in a classroom. They seem to profit off the classroom, but they've never been in one, right? They call the testing guy, textbook guy, and the guy who sells pencils. Well, they don't call the teacher or the principal or the counselor. So I think that's the biggest part of the problem. And Lord knows, I don't know how a nation of 75 million K-12 students is supposed to compare to a nation with 3 million K-12 students. It's live in reality versus fantasy. It's just impossible.
I want to get Matt in here because I think he'll agree with me on this one.
That's right.
Matt, privatizing schools. I don't know where you went. I think you went to play like Nintendo or something there for a second.
No. I'll tell you what happened, Will. This computer, the whole audience knows the computer I have is the biggest piece of shit ever. I go out below $500 on a new computer. I somehow buy the one computer that has no internal mic, so I can't use it for the goddamn show. So I'm stuck with this thing. So that's where I was. This thing died on me again.
And you're stuck with that haircut.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What's the question?
I went around before and asked everybody about the privatization of schools, and that would be the best way to mitigate the effects of our poor public school system here, certainly in urban areas. Would you agree with that statement?
Yes. I mean, I would like private schools with, some sort of voucher system for families whose incomes are below a certain threshold. But yes, that's the system I like.
So you're saying what I said to Grant, and Grant called me names.
I would have heard that if I was online while you said that. Yes.
Yeah, Grant over there playing around with the
Shut up, Will.
decals. Actually, that one with the clown thing made you look better. You don't look like a convict.
I'm only bummed that Whitney laughed at your joke about my haircut. I thought you would have liked it.
I know.
Laughter, I was shocked. I was like, wow.
We're very mean to each other.
I'm just kidding. Actually, that is way better.
Y'all would benefit from a federal grant to tackle bullying, and I could connect you with the Department of Education because I'm sure they have funding to help you.
No, my mom's an anti-bullying specialist, and even she says the regulations and rules are absurd. So.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm surprised that there's rules and regulations that are absurd.
Is your mom upstairs right now making your Hot Pockets?
Yes. She even blows on them for me so they're not too hot.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, she makes my bed. It's fantastic.
Yeah, that is nice. Very good, Matthew.
Hardening it with her knife. She's like, oh, hello, I love you.
Whitney's getting in on it. Yeah.
But on a serious note, I do live alone.
You do?
Well, I mean, on my own, I should say. I have 3 housemates who make my bed and Hot Pockets for me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Your housemates, your mom, your dad, and your brother. I want to move on. We got into the education thing, and we destroyed that. I mean, we made, obviously, the left and the establishment look stupid. Thank you, Whitney. You're the smartest person I've ever met in my life, and you're way better than the rest of my panel. I want to move on to the obvious 2016 field. I wanted to talk about candidates. I'm going to start with Grant, go to Kevin, get to Matt, and then go to you, Whitney. Obviously, the cognoscenti of the field as compared to these guys here, the escaped convict all the way there to the left. I mean, Jesus, when are they going to find you?
President.
When are they going to find you and throw you back in the clink, pal? All right. Your favorites right now, Grant, and disfavorites in the 2016 field.
My favorites, first to third, we'll say Rand Paul, Scott Walker, and then Ted Cruz.
How do you put Walker ahead of Cruz?
I like him. I like him.
You are insane. You belong in jail.
I'm a statist and I'm a neocon.
You are a bootlicking neocon.
I like, you know what? I mean, Scott Walker has been just standing up to unions left and right, and he shows that he's got some real balls that he could maybe take to the White House, and I think right now that's something we need there. As far as least favorites, number one, Bernie Sanders. Yeah. Bernie Sanders. I hate him so much. He is completely oblivious, and he's also my number 2, Bernie Sanders. And then number 3 is Hillary Clinton.
Kevin, give Grant the bad news on Bernie Sanders polling. The last poll you saw, well, I think it was a Fox News poll, right?
Well, no, this was the straw. There was a straw.
Oh, yeah, straw poll.
The straw poll out in, I forget, the Midwest, maybe Iowa or something, for Democrats, and it had Hillary at 46%. She won the straw poll. Sanders came in second with 41%.
Oh my God!
Okay. Now, what this tells you is that people we're not far enough left. People want to go all the way to Stalin, basically.
I love it when
keep going as far left as we can. Let's bring Lenin back.
I love when I hear people say, you know what, he has some really bad ideas. He's kind of crazy, but at least he's honest. I'm like, oh, good. So he admits he's crazy, and you're okay with that.
Hey, at least
stupidest narrative.
That's the worst argument for picking a candidate. Hitler was fucking honest.
He was an honest guy.
Charles Manson was honest. Come on.
Yeah, so there's the bad news. Most of your articles do a good job of ripping Bernie Sanders to shreds, which isn't really hard to do.
No.
I mean, but you do a good job.
About 10 minutes to write it.
Yeah, I don't want to give you too much credit or the credit you deserve, because then you'll get a fat head and then you'll start writing crap. You know what I mean? It's like Andy Roddick. The guy won one match. Next thing you know, no one's ever heard of him again. You know what I mean?
You would reference tennis.
I would. Yeah, there were a ton of references. No one likes.
In general, right?
What's that?
That's the British in general, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, Kevin, give me your top 3 and your least favorite.
All right. First of all, you know I can't, jackass, because I'm supposedly unbiased, so I can't tell you who I want to win.
You're about as unbiased as Bernie Sanders is.
It's a secret. My followers don't know that, so let's not talk about that.
Let's say that you were a normal human being. Who would your top 3 be?
I will tell you who I think will win.
Okay.
As opposed to who I want to win. I don't think Rand has a shot in hell.
You're crazy.
No, he doesn't have a chance in hell.
Okay, George Will in 1980.
Record this right now.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I saw some poll numbers out of New Hampshire that had Jeb Bush in front. And
so what?
Hold on, just will you know what?
You're making me angry, pal.
When you're talking, I mute my mic out of respect for you.
Go ahead.
So why don't you just mute your face?
Talk about how Jeb Bush is going to win.
No, but what I'm saying is, all right, I'm not hoping for this outcome, but the more I look at that poll number out of New Hampshire, the more I think if he starts rolling early on, I think he's going to be the presumptive candidate. And
Jeb?
I think Jeb, and I think it's going to be hard for the people who are sort of on the grassroots and on the Tea Party and whatever, who aren't mainstream. I think it's going to be hard for them to stop him from rolling. He's got the machine behind him. And as long as he has some numbers that say, hey, maybe he can win, I think the mainstream people will start supporting him. If it's not him, I think Rubio has a pretty good shot. I think his narrative is starting to shine through, and I think I would certainly take him over Jeb. And I don't think Rand can get past the primaries, unfortunately. He's got the best chance. Rand has the best chance against Hillary. All the numbers confirm this, but I don't think he'll make it through the primaries.
I think we could run a sack of potatoes against Hillary and do pretty damn well at this point.
You think she's going to lose?
I mean, she's going to have a hard time in a general right now with the poor-performing Democrat president. I mean, the woman brings a ton of baggage. I don't think she would get clobbered. Don't get me wrong here. But I think she would have a hard time withstanding the criticisms in a general election. I mean, I still have hope for the American people here, perhaps. But
really, I foresee President Sanders in our future.
I wouldn't doubt that either.
I'm moving to Cuba.
So I've always wondered who Kevin worked for. Now I know it's the Chamber of Commerce. So thank you, Kevin.
Bush is his neighbor, most likely.
Yeah, he probably can't. I think it. Like I said, he says it's in Connecticut. I think it's in Kennebunkport, Maine. Matt.
Yes.
Your top 3 and your top 3 least favorite.
On the Republican side, it's none of the above for all 3, and on the Democratic side, it's my least favorite is Bernie Sanders for the top 3.
Who's your least favorite amongst Republicans?
I mean, either Jeb or Santorum. I mean, I guess with Santorum, you at least have the excuse that people make with.
Lindsey Graham's running, right?
Oh, I did not. So
yeah.
I'll take that into consideration. But
yeah,
I mean, at least with Santorum, you have the factor that people say with Sanders that I just criticized that he believes what he says. But I think I hate the establishment people more, like Jeb and I guess Graham.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whitney, your top 3 Republican candidates and your top 3 least favorite Republican candidates.
So I'm gonna lay it out here. I'm gonna go kind of the way Kevin did and talk a little bit in ideology and then a little bit in reality. With a caveat that I'm a Texan, and so I worked really, really hard for Ted Cruz in 2012.
Love that guy.
Best option, and so I got to give that out there. I love him. I love everybody who works for him. I have a lot of friends. My heart is there. Big, deep heart there. I also love Rand, but I agree with Kevin that, God, there's just, until I see some people taking things really seriously and developing an actual strategy, putting together legislation and a platform, I think I'm going to have a really hard time believing that's a legitimate candidacy. And I love him. I want him to be there, and I want him to win. So when I say least favorites, I'll go with everyone almost. I hate Lindsey Graham. I can't stand Jeb Bush. I hope Rick Santorum and Mike Huckabee disappear. Quickly, Pataki, what the heck? I love Ted. I love Rand. And honestly, I think that if I had to choose with someone who could possibly be a wild horse in there, I'm going to agree that Rubio is somebody that I would support over Jeb. I think that his story is going to really resonate with people. I think he's done a great job trying to be the average guy, the guy who can be on the side of liberty but be pragmatic and build relationships across the aisle. And I think he's somebody to watch because, let's look back to 2010. We got Rubio because of the Tea Party wave. That element, that sentiment, that identity is still there. He could pick up and build off of it if he really needed to. And he has money. So let's really consider that. I like Carly Fiorina only because women need a voice. And if Hillary is the de facto on the left, we got to have somebody there. So, I mean, those are all factors. And on the Democrat side, I don't think that Bernie Sanders is a long-term factor. But I think we got to pay attention to people like the Castro brothers, Joaquin and Julian Castro out of Texas. I know them really well from my time there. They're extremely appealing to people. If Hillary decided to pick one of them up as a running mate, decided to support them a little bit on the campaign trail, that's a dynamic that we have to, as Liberty voters or as potential GOP voters, we have to explore. They speak to a very wide constituency of potential voters, and I think we have to remember that that's out there. We also have to remember that in 2008, Barack Obama was an unknown first-term senator, and Julian and Joaquin are kind of along those same paths, spoke at the previous Democratic National Convention. They've got that mythical, beautiful, untouched thing about them. We have to watch them closely. And if Hillary is starting to falter, they might be the guy that comes in and rides that right horse, that next constituency into the White House. So pay close attention to that being something that the Democrats play for.
Okay. I like that assessment. I disagree with you and Kevin on the Rand Paul Ted Cruz thing, though. Ted Cruz is so eloquently well-spoken. He's doing well with his money. His PAC has raised a ton of money. I think it was $46 million last I checked. And he got
I love Paul.
Yeah. He got a ton of grassroots donations. The guy rarely slips up. I mean, he rarely... I've never seen somebody so measured before when confronting people that are attacking him. Open. Rand, go ahead.
From personal experience, what you see with Ted is 100% what you get. He is literally himself all the time. And so I don't think that there's that element of, gosh, he's going to get out on the campaign trail and say something different or get in the White House and be something different. 100% himself all the dang time. Mm-hmm. And that's a beautiful thing about him that we don't have in almost any other candidate out there.
Right. And I like that he's got guts. I mean, I think he went to Iowa and said he's against these corn subsidies, flat out said it. I love that. Rand Paul never really did that. He kind of beat around it. I think the market should set prices. But come out and say, no, none of this corn subsidy crap. I just want people to be, I think these people that are waiting for somebody, I think I see this dichotomy between a 76 and 80 with Reagan. Everybody's saying Reagan doesn't have a shot all over the place. I think Rand Paul, his skepticism of the government is excellent. And I think that riles a lot of people up. I think that his one interview when he went after the gal there, I don't remember the news station, I think that riled people up. I thought that was good. It's like, are you kidding me? I think that these guys rile people up. I think that they draw a lot of attention. I think Jeb Bush is going to have problems with conservatives, most definitely, and Republicans because of his last name. I don't think any Republican in their right mind wants another Bush term. I think that's going to hurt him. Yes, he has corporatist money. He's got the Chamber of Commerce, his establishment behind him. I think it would be a bad move to nominate Jeb Bush, and I think there are some elements that may know that. Call me nuts here, but do you think that really Hillary Clinton is going to win the Democratic nomination? Do you see an Elizabeth Warren coming in the last minute, or do you see? Are you counting Martin O'Malley out right away?
I'm not counting anybody out because I think that Hillary has placed herself right in the same place she did in 2008. When you put yourself out there as the presumptive nominee, but you have so many skeletons, you have set the groundwork for somebody to come in and sweep it right out from under you. Right. And I don't. And I think if the GOP is building their entire strategy around whoever wins is going to face Hillary, man, you are failing us.
Right. And to your point. And to your point earlier, if they keep setting their strategy around Hillary Clinton and Benghazi and the emails, you're not going to win either. So you need to, like you said, you need to come up with something concrete. I know where Rand Paul and Ted Cruz are coming from. Constitutional principles, limited government. I know where they're coming from. Scott Walker, I like. I don't know where Scott Walker's coming from on most other issues. I know when when Ted Cruz shut down the government in October, I think it was 2013, Scott Walker's out there saying, you know, why would you shut down the government? Why wouldn't you? I don't understand. Here's a guy using constitutional principles. I think I'd like to see Republicans rally around that. That makes me not trust Scott Walker. I don't know. So go ahead.
Scott Walker, something to really look at, and I work with a lot of activists in and out of Wisconsin. Let's look at where he was on Common Core. We talked about that earlier. Really look at the Scott Walker record. Where was he early on when he realized that this was a federal government intervention into state policy? Because he flip-flopped. And he hasn't actually been an ardent supporter of state rights and education.
Right.
And if he can't do that, if he can't do that for kids, if he can't do that for parents, where is he going to be if he's in the White House?
Right, exactly.
A lot of people ask him that question long-term in the race. That's going to be a big weakness for him and people like Mike Pence and others that want to enter the race, but they don't have a good record on those issues. Right.
No, I agree. And you have this Kasich that's going to run too. Here's another guy that talks out of both sides of his mouth. He's a Lindsey Graham, but almost worse. No, that's impossible. He can't be worse. Let's talk about Rick Perry for a second and his chances. I'll start with Grant. What do you think of Rick Perry? He has a good record. He has a good record in Texas. I'm not saying... Go ahead.
He has a good record in economics in Texas. He does that. He does that. I don't like him because he's a cartoon to me. Like, he's not... Like, he gets on TV, and I saw that picture of him riding with the Border Patrol. Like, he's got the black jacket on, and he's like, you're like, protect the border. And I saw that, and I was like, what? Okay, I know this is like trying to go for the propaganda thing, but wow, like, you look a little ridiculous. So I just can't. He's giving me no reason to take him seriously. You know, I mean, he has got a good record in Texas, but...
Do you think he has a chance?
No.
Okay. Kevin, Rick Perry thoughts?
I think he has a chance. I think he's adopted some populist tone, and I think a lot of people like the things he says, and I think he plays well down south in Texas and so forth, at least to the people that like his swagger. I think one of the things a lot of us we're not really talking about much is personality, and I think if he faltered was personality. He faltered last election in the during the debates, and he's had a lot of boneheaded things. But I think he does have a sort of Texas swagger, and he's got that. He's very into states' rights, which a lot of people like, and a lot of people get behind. I think there's his experience as a governor. People like that as opposed to a senator or somebody coming out of Washington. I think he's got a chance. I think the big things are going to be what happens in the first few primaries, what happens in New Hampshire, and also sooner than that is going to be the first primaries, which I don't remember the date, but it's coming up pretty quickly. And I think the first few debates are really going to, you're going to have 10 people on stage. I heard they're not going to have everybody, but you're going to have 10 people on stage at a time, and one of them's going to stand out, and I think that person's going to get the front runner status pretty quickly. So I think personality is going to have a big role to play in who we choose.
Okay, that's a good synopsis, for you. Matt,
yes.
Rick Perry, do you think he has a chance? Why or why not?
I have three problems with Rick Perry. One, I think he's been overzealous on immigration. Two, I don't know how much he knows about economics. And three, I don't know the third one.
Oh, I see what you did there.
You see what I did there?
I see what you did there.
I went for it.
You did it, and it worked.
It worked.
I didn't see it coming.
That was my goal all along.
That was actually, I did not see that coming.
Well, that's the second part of the equation, though. Sorry, that's the second part of the equation. There's going to be a lot of boneheaded things said in the first debate that's going to eliminate people that probably could win the presidency. That's what happened to him last time.
Yeah, no, you're right. Is there anything you like about before I get to Whitney? Is there anything you like about Rick Perry, Matt?
Oh, I'm sorry. I know he has a very good record in Texas, but I think he's just a good governor for Texas. In terms of economics, I see Whitney here disagreeing with me, and he's from Texas, so I'm probably wrong. Actually, I have no idea what I'm talking about, so I'll just let Whitney tell me why I'm wrong.
This is why I brought Rick Perry up. And Whitney, tell us why you do not like Rick Perry. Was it his record in Texas?
Guys, I love y'all, but oh my gosh. So I think, first of all, there's this crazy misconception out there that Texans love Rick Perry. Not true. He's been our governor for or he was our governor for a bajillion years, longest serving governor in Texas history. Texans don't like that. Second thing, what people outside of Texas don't know is that the Texas governorship is one of the weakest positions in politics in the country. The Texas governor has no control over the legislative agenda, over anything. The only thing that they can do, veto stuff. Like, sign a bill, veto it, that's it. They don't have any control over the legislature. The lieutenant governor, the speaker of the House, it was written into the Texas Constitution that the governor would be exceptionally weak because they were avoiding any kind of executive with power, right?
Well, he could fire district attorneys, right?
Yeah. Rick Perry goes to the Northeast, he goes to California, he's like, hey, come to Texas, we'll give you all these things. The only reason that he's in a position to offer that is because he's a crony capitalist, he's a crony governor. He nominated, because he was governor for 14 plus years, he was in a position to have nominated every single person, in a position of power in the state of Texas to be nominated to a position. They all owe him something. So of course he can go to other states and be like, hey, I'll get you this, I'll get you this, you should do this, you should come here. Because he could tell that person he nominated, by the way, I'm calling in that favor. None of this is because he was some legislative genius or great policy person or whatever.
Right.
And if you've ever had a one-on-one meeting with a guy, God bless him, he doesn't really know what the heck you're talking about, especially on issues of importance. And so, he's got to be like, okay, well, I'll talk to you about that tomorrow, because he's going to call some lobbyist or advisor and ask them what the answer is. So, God bless him. That's why debates are hard, because poor guy doesn't know the dang answer. And he's like, oh, crap, do I have a note card that told me what I was supposed to say or whatever? He doesn't know. And I'm sure he's a great guy. He pretends to hunt things in city parks and kill them and shoot them while he's on a bicycle or whatever. I mean, great guy, but he is a caricature of what a Texas politician should be. And good Lord, I pray for the country if he is ever our nominee. And because no,
Let's say, Whitney, let's say for a moment you had a choice between Lindsey Graham and Rick Perry.
I'm in hell, right? Like I'm already in hell. Like I've done something.
Which country would you move to?
Yeah.
Oh God. So if I have to choose between Lindsey Graham and Rick Perry, I'm gonna pick Rick because hopefully I can get in a position where I can be the person in his ear all the damn time and tell him what to say.
Oh, you would have a chance.
Will,
Okay.
Will, can you pick suicide?
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, honestly, that's not my thing. I'm afraid
You
of
can,
blood,
man.
especially my own. I mean, look.
I'm more afraid of Lindsey Graham than I am of blood, so I would choose suicide over Lindsey Graham. So obviously I'd pick Rick Perry over Lindsey Graham. I'd pick anyone over Lindsey Graham.
I've been asked before, what's worse, Jeb Bush or Hillary Clinton? And I've sat in the room and thought about it, and I've said to myself, what's worse, the enemy that you know, or the enemy that's going to screw you for 8 years of elections going forward because they pretend to be something they're not?
Right.
To be perfectly honest, I mean, that's my assessment of it.
Right. I mean, at that point, it's like, who's worse, Jeb Bush or a ham sandwich?
Right.
You know what I mean? This is all interesting stuff. There's a lot I didn't know about Rick Perry. I do know a lot about Rick Perry. I mean, I wouldn't want him as my candidate, but I mean, I don't know here. I think Walker has a good shot too, to be honest. But I would really like it to be Cruz or Paul, and I think they do have a shot. And I don't think you could discount them that early. So there's a lot coming up. Jeb Bush can make a mistake. You don't know here. And I think his last name has a ton of baggage. I think people are tired of the Bushes and the Clintons. I mean, you even hear Democrats talking about, God, I had enough of these Clintons. You know?
So the story, that Rubio story, don't discount it, because that Rubio story is going to resonate with people.
Right. The Bill of Rights Institute, Whitney, can you tell me about what their mission is necessarily?
So actually, it's really cool. I joined the Bill of Rights Institute a year ago. Our goal is to actually engage, educate, and empower students and teachers with the ideas that we've just discussed today, the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, that kind of thing. So the average high school student is going to vote. The junior or senior of this year is going to vote in the next presidential election. So how do we make sure that junior or senior understands what their rights are, what they're out there voting to protect and defend, and what the implications of those decisions are? What are the policies? What are the, all of those things? What does it say in the Constitution about their role as a member of civic society? And that's what we do. which is really cool for me.
And what approach does the Bill of Rights Institute take? Is it like an originalist approach? Is it like that, like kind of like a Borgian approach? So
I mean, our approach really to the Constitution and the Bill of Rights is that there's nothing in the Constitution or the Bill of Rights that says that you as an individual person wasn't endowed with those rights.
Right.
So it's extremely individualist. And so we go at those students and say, look, the First Amendment is yours. The Second Amendment is yours. And it is your job not only to exercise those rights, but to protect and defend them.
Right, so it's basically a natural law theories, essentially. Okay, I got you. That's really cool. I think that's important. I don't know how many people understand that the Constitution is a restrictive document, and that obviously the Bill of Rights was meant to restrict Congress. It means Congress shall make no law, obviously referring to the fact that these rights belong to us, and that rights are not conferred by government. That government is restricted to and impinge on those rights. And I don't know how many people really actually understand that. I love the Constitution and constitutional law, but it's hard to get people interested in it.
Well, it's because they're not taught that it's theirs. I mean, I think ownership is a beautiful thing, and unless we tell people you own this belongs to you, they're not going to be like, oh, hey, I should make sure I still have this great thing that determines my life going forward. And it's our job at the Bill of Rights Institute and beyond to make sure that not just students, but their teachers, their parents, and whoever else are engaging students with those issues.
Right.
And so when you have something like Baltimore or Ferguson or something like that happens, how can we make sure that those conversations are happening in the context of the Bill of Rights and what your Fourth, First, Second Amendment rights really are?
Right. It's important stuff. Guys, do you have any questions for Whitney?
Kind of.
Go ahead.
So like I think I agree with probably. Well, I'm sure you would be against standardized testing in most cases, but I think one use is it at least gives us, I guess, some measurement to do an apples-to-apples comparison internationally. Obviously, there are flaws, like as you mentioned, in China, but it seems that it at least serves some sort of purpose in that regard. So is there a middle ground between, the ridiculous amount of standardized testing we have today and maybe having, let's say, one standardized test a year just so we could do international comparisons? Is there a middle ground?
There's definitely a great middle ground. I think the problem that you're seeing that people are upset about is that an average 8th grader spends 48 days of their school year, so 48 of about 170 in testing environments, a standardized testing environment. That's a ton of days outside of teaching, enlightenment, engagement, that kind of thing. The pushback isn't that we don't need them altogether, it's that there's just such an emphasis in so many of them that it's ridiculous. And it's putting limitations on teachers, and it's putting limitations on students and those kinds of things. So the middle ground is, where are the most relevant opportunities for this type of testing, and who is analyzing that data to make the reports off of the data? I think that's where we have to figure out what those balances are.
Right. Okay, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what I think, too, so that's good.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I do. I'm a little shocked that nobody here, especially a teacher, didn't choose as a dark horse candidate Lincoln Chafee, the former governor of Rhode Island, and his all-encompassing platform of we should move to the metric system. I would think that at least you, Whitney, would latch onto that and say, this is a game changer, and he's going to be president someday, and it will change the world.
I've failed. I have failed in my assessment of this race, of the landscape, of the fundraising opportunities that there are inherent in his candidacy, and I just, gosh, no.
Actually, no, I do. I'm obviously joking, but I do have a question for everybody here, which is, do you care about the metric system? Because he really did get a lot of time on the news this past week when he announced his candidacy, and the only thing he talked about was he wants to bring America to the metric system. I'm not giving any legitimacy to his platform. I'm just saying it got me thinking. Like, people really care about this?
I've heard that before, and Whitney may know this better than I have. I know I heard in the 90s that I remember my biology teacher saying explicitly, in 5 years we'll be on the metric system. I've heard it before. I've just never seen a push towards the metric system. You know how much that would cost, to move to the metric system? I just don't think anybody would want to incur those costs. Go ahead, Whitney.
So yes, people will say it's going to be really expensive. Let's be realistic. The only people who are really worried about that are the textbook operators who get to create textbooks based off of our system versus the metric system for this country. And realistically, yes, if I could have my dithers, we would switch to the metric system and it would be beautiful. Not sure I would ever run for office on that as my platform, but it's something we should talk about. And the Department of Education is going to take up any initiative, maybe that's the one they should tackle. Let's look at that versus all the other crap that they talk about all the time.
Well, shouldn't this stuff happen from the bottom up, really? Like, can't localities say, yeah, we're going to start doing the metric system here? I mean, I think that would create problems in and of itself, but I don't know if that would, I mean, I think that's really how things should change, is bottom up.
Well, maybe the government should offer a subsidy to the automobile companies to make sure that your car is ready for that.
Yeah, they should just give subsidies, I think, to just about everybody at this point. I need a subsidy.
I want to subsidy.
I think we're on to something, guys.
I think we are on to
subsidies.
something. We're definitely on to something. I'm going to wrap up the show here. I think Mike needs to go to bed because he has, like, kids and stuff. Kevin, don't you have a kid?
Oh, yeah, I think so.
God, I can't believe that somebody liked you enough to have a kid with you.
First of all, what do you mean Mike needs? Who's Mike?
Mike is doing our little deal here.
Huh?
Yeah, so Whitney, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on. You're a great guest. So much knowledge bestowed upon all of us here. So much so that I wrote some of it down, and I'm going to have to study it later because I forget a lot of things. I also forgot that. Go ahead.
Well, I loved it. We should hang out again. And I'm sorry for interrupting 500 times. I get really passionate, so I will talk over you because I think I'm really important. I'm just kidding. But we should definitely hang out again. It'd be fun.
All right. Thank you so much, Whitney. I appreciate it. And the rest of you guys, thanks for showing up. Thank you so much, Kevin, for being who you are. And I love your hair color. And Grant.
Oh, Mike Reed. You were talking about Mike Reed.
Thank you,
Yes.
Whitney.
And Grant, go back to jail.
They'll never catch me alive.
And Maddie, we'll talk haircuts later. Thanks again, Whitney.
That's good. Off the
Thanks,
air.
Whitney.
Bye, y'all. Thank you.
Bye.